right, we are back here on SportsLine talking the Titans tonight. Mike Mularkey specifically. Interim coach has come in and I think done a valiant job with a team that was pretty much a disaster for the year and a half before that. He's got a couple wins under his belt. Also a couple games that team had a chance to win but couldn't figure out how to finish. Then all of a sudden this weekend, one of those disasters again against the Jets, a good Jets team, and a team that is not a very good matchup for this Titans squad, the way they play defense, their size and strength on the lines, but still not a good performance at all. So how do you view Mike Mularkey moving forward? The question tonight, if you're in charge of the Titans, do you give Mike Mularkey the shot? Would you remove the interim tag and allow him to be the head coach with all these young players that he's worked with this season moving forward? And if not, what do you do on the other side of the ball? Presuming you go out and bring in a new head coach. Is it an offensive head coach? We had a caller earlier suggest Mike Shula, who's the Panthers offensive coordinator. Do you go to the offensive side of the ball? Marcus Mariota, obviously a quarterback that you want to cater to. And if you do go to the offensive side of the ball, what do you do with a guy like Dick LeBeau, who was your prize get last year, to bring in a Hall of Famer to be in charge of your defense? Do you do everything possible to keep him around? Or are you okay to just say it's time to scrap everything and start over if you're the Tennessee Titans? Phone lines are open, 737-7767. We go back to the phones now. And Jay, how are you, my friend?
Good. Hey, glad you're back.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
I've been praying for you. I got a question. What do you think about the Kirby Smart hire and your picks on the Final Four in the football playoffs? And also, I'm a Cowboys fan. Of course, they're falling apart also. And you think Jerry Jones can get it through his thick head to finally draft a quarterback? I'll hang up and listen. Thank you.
I think they may be getting there in Dallas, Jay, because how much longer does Tony Romo have? I think he's a really good quarterback, and I think he's been underrated for a long time in terms of what he's brought to the Cowboys. That said, he's struggling to stay upright for 16 games right now. And I think it's time to start grooming somebody else. And you've seen this year that the guys that they've had, Brandon Whedon, Matt Castle, they're just not getting it done. And so it may be time, if you're the Cowboys, to start looking into bringing in someone, not necessarily to be the guy right away, but trying to identify somebody who you believe in, who can learn under Romo and provide you an insurance policy moving forward. Kirby Smart hire, I think, is unimaginative if you're Georgia. I think he's a good football coach. I think he's well respected. He's a terrific recruiter. You cannot take that away from him. But here's the thing. When you're a Nick Saban defensive coordinator, how much are you even really doing? Because Nick Saban is incredibly involved with that defense. So do we even know how good Kirby Smart is in terms of the game day management and some of that? I got questions there. And then the other part to that is, to me, Georgia is certainly a top 10 job, probably 6 or 7. And you could make a good argument, a top 5 job in the country with their geography, the recruiting location, history, fan base, resources, etc. Is the best they can do an alum that up to this point has just been a defensive coordinator? Because to me, Georgia was the best job, probably including USC to me, because of some of the excess stuff going on in LA. To me, that was the best job hiring in this span here. And it seems like they just completely locked their sights on Kirby Smart and said, he's our guy, let's go get him. And if I'm Georgia, I think you can reach higher than that and go for a guy at the very least and make him say no to you. And don't forget here, you're getting rid of a guy in Mark Richt who averaged, 10 wins a season for 15 years? He may have hit his head against the ceiling, so after 15 years, I'm not saying that Georgia was absolutely nuts to say goodbye to Mark Richt, but just remember what happened to Tennessee when they got rid of Phil Fulmer. And what's happened to Texas after Mac Brown and some of these other places. Sometimes you may think that the next guy is going to automatically be better and he'll be able to get you that next win or two. But let me tell you, it's a lot easier to go backwards from 10 wins than it is to go forward from 10 wins. And so it'll be very interesting, and I think the pressure's on Kirby Smart at Georgia to do exactly that, to build on what Mark Richt did and take the Dogs to a place that Mark Richt was unable to do. And finally, the college football playoff. I think they got it right. I think this was an incredibly easy year for the College Football Selection Committee. I do think Ohio State, if they somehow were in or this was an 8-team playoff, would be incredibly dangerous. I think Stanford would scare some people if this was an 8-team playoff. But here's the thing. Ohio State didn't play anybody, and the biggest game they played, or the two games they played at the end of the year, they lost one of them to Michigan State, and then they looked like the team we finally thought they would be in Ann Arbor against Michigan. Or Stanford looks like a great team. I think they'd scare a lot of people in the playoff, but they lost 2 games. Neither one of them, to me, has a legitimate gripe that they belong in the playoff field. I think the committee got it right. Ultimately, I'd love to see an 8-team playoff, but frankly, if you're anti-8-team playoff and like it where it is at 4, this is your model year. This is as clean and easy as it gets. You've got an undefeated Clemson team at number 1. You have the champion of the SEC. No screwy division issues, just a clear-cut champion in Alabama that everybody believes is probably the best pound-for-pound team in the playoff. You have an Oklahoma team that was as hot and as good as anybody down the stretch in the playoff. And you have a Michigan State team that was the champion of the RPI best league this year in the Big Ten. Now, certainly people in this part of the country would argue that the SEC is still better top to bottom, and I don't necessarily disagree. But when you look at the top of the Big Ten with Michigan State, Ohio State, Iowa, and even throw Michigan into that mix, and frankly probably throw Northwestern into that mix to a degree, that's a pretty good top 4 or 5, and Michigan State was the champion there. To me, that 4 was pretty cut and dry, and the committee got it right. Let's go on to Brett. Brett, good evening. You're on SportsLine.
Hello, Steve. I just kind of had a personal epiphany sitting here listening to you talk about the coaching staff and everything. And I've always thought that the coaching staff was probably more of the problem of the Titans than it really was, because I think there's a lot of good coaches out there, but I think our biggest problem, like a lot of other football teams have, is the talent that we have. And whoever is in charge of getting the talent, I think that's where we need to make our improvements. You can only do so much with the talent that you have. And I think Mularkey should be given more time, because I think he's probably a better coach than, I mean, if he had the people, if he had the personnel, like, you know, look at New England, look at these no-name people they get, but they're really talented people. And so I just think we need to work on scouting. But I'll just hang up and let you comment.
Brett, we appreciate the call. Look, it's hard to argue with that. There's no question the Titans are not nearly as talented as some of the better teams in the league. But let's also look at an example from last year. Akeem Ayers is a guy that they drafted high to come in and be an impact player on this defense. And a couple years into his career, Ken Wisenhunt and this staff basically deemed that he didn't belong on their roster. He was inactive early in the season last year. They end up making a trade to New England, and he becomes a key part of that defense on their way to winning a Super Bowl last year. So, yes, it's talent to a degree, but also, what's the coaching staff doing with guys like Akeem Ayers? Because Bill Belichick is the best coach in the NFL. I don't think anybody's going to argue that. And he found a way to take a guy that was a cast-off from the team that picked second in the league in the draft this past season and made him a key part of a defense that won the Super Bowl. So coaching to me absolutely is an issue here. But I put a lot of that on Ken Whisenhunt and what happened during his time there, less so on the guys who remain, and I think have moved this in a more positive direction the last few weeks. The other thing that's interesting is when it comes to talent, yes, it's about scouting. Yes, it's about your general manager and Rustin Webster. But the other thing that I want to look at is how much influence did Ken Whisenhunt have when it came to some of these draft picks? Because it's easy to criticize Rustin Webster for some of the drafts and the way some of these guys have panned out. But I've got an inkling from people I talk to and the knowledge I have about the situation that Ken Whisenhunt pushed himself around and his influence around in that building when it came to draft picks and where they got guys and the guys they got and which side of the ball they went on. And so, yes, the general manager deserves some significant blame, but I'm also curious a bit about seeing what Rustin Webster does if it's a Rustin Webster draft and not a Ken Whisenhunt draft. And I'm not sure we have the evidence there. And that's the unfortunate thing about it is it's kind of a muddy picture. I see wherever you go, and that if you say it's time to move on from Rustin Webster, I'm not sure I have a great argument against it based off of the results. But if you say you haven't seen enough, I tend to fall in that camp a little bit too, that you haven't seen enough of his program. And if you're going to have as much faith that this ownership seems to have in Rustin Webster, the fact that he's still there, the fact that he seems to be a guy that they're going to turn to in terms of this coaching decision, I think at some point you have to give him the power to essentially veto the head coach, which I don't think he had with Ken Whisenhunt, and say, no, this is the direction we're going. We're going to go get him. Let's go to Mike before we take a break. Mike, good evening. You're on SportsLine.
Good evening there, sir. Hey, glad to have you back, man. Appreciate all you're doing up that way.
Appreciate it.
My question is, do you think with our new head coach that we have for the Titans, do you think there might ever be a chance that he might, if Peyton retires into this year, maybe come up and be the offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans when he retires, if he does this year? And my other question is, the coach that used to coach the Georgia Bulldogs, if there ever happened to be an opening job for the NFL, do you think he might have a chance to go and coach in the NFL? And because I think he's a great, good Christian coach, and maybe down the road we might consider bringing him on the staff as a Titan, as a good old hometown boy, and a hang up and have a great Merry Christmas.
All right, Merry Christmas to you, Mike. Mark Richt, second question there. He's the new head coach at Miami. He went back to his alma mater, has a job there. It's kind of an interesting fit. They've been known as sort of the renegades of college football, and as you mentioned, he's a very religious, devout Christian that will be an interesting fit in Miami. But he's also a good football coach. And so I think it'll be a lot of fun to watch what he can do with Miami. I think that's his last job, especially if he has any level of success there. I think he'll do that until he doesn't want to coach anymore. I don't think he's an NFL type of guy, so I think that also weighs out what you may think would be a good opportunity for him, because I think he's an interpersonal relation guy that you have much more opportunity to do on the recruiting trail and coaching college athletes, and he's more of a hands-on coach, and I think he wants to do more of that in his time at Miami. And in terms of the Titans moving forward, I'm sorry, I'm kind of blanking on the first part of the question. I think it was about Mike Mularkey and if he sticks around, or if we bring in, bring in Peyton Manning. There's been a lot of talk about what Peyton Manning would do after he is done with football, and based off of the injuries this year, we might be moving closer to that date than people expected 12 months ago. It's still really hard to go straight from the field to offensive coordinator or general manager or any of the things that people have really suspected him to move into. If he wants to, Peyton Manning could be really good at that someday. But it is difficult for me to imagine that he's going to hang it up in January or February of this year, and by April, he's going to be at the Titans facility or any facility in the NFL working as a coordinator. Maybe as an assistant coach. But honestly, if you play for that long, I'm not sure he wouldn't just want to take some time away from the game and let his mind sort of decompress a bit. But no question, Peyton Manning is a brilliant offensive mind. We've seen that throughout his career. And if he wants to, he'll have the opportunity to get involved with the NFL game at some level moving forward. All right, we're running behind. We got to take a break. But our phone lines remain open, so keep dialing us up. 737-7767 is the number. Stay tuned. More SportsLine here on News Channel 5 Plus right after this.